Wednesday on the Locked On NFL podcast. Who's the top dog in the NFL? And behind them, is this really a mediocre time? Tom Brady talked about it. We'll get to that and talk about Matt Canada being fired by the Pittsburgh Steelers. All that and more here on the Locked On NFL podcast. Chris Carter, Lorin Cox coming at you. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. I'm Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers. He's Lorin Cox of Locked On Bears, filling in for James Rapine of Locked On Bengals. He'll be back next week. But Lorin, thanks so much for filling in, and thank you all for tuning in to another big episode here on the Locked On NFL podcast. A reminder, this show is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, and you create an account and use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. More on them later. Okay, Lorin. Let's get into this right now. This was talked about yesterday, just the Eagles beating the Chiefs, great Monday night showdown, all that there. But right now, I think there is a legitimate, really fun conversation to be had about who is the top dog in the NFL. Who is the undisputed number one team? The Eagles could lay claim to that right now. They've played very well. They just beat a team that a lot of people might consider the top dog in the NFL. They're right now they're 9-1 sitting atop the NFC, but people are talking about the Niners because the Niners, they struggled for a little bit, but they've gotten back on the horse and they look strong again. And right now, if you're looking at both conferences, the Ravens are the 1 seed at 8-3. Some people argue that if they had their stuff together, they'd be undefeated or at least in the 10-1 conversation like the Eagles. The Lions sit there at 8-2. The Chiefs barely lost to the Eagles. There's 4 7-3 teams right now in the AFC. If you have a top dog right now, who is it in the NFL, Lorin?
Yeah, I think right this second today, it's the Philadelphia Eagles for having the best record, for not having nearly as many of those missteps as all the other teams have had. But like the Eagles being the best team in the NFL right now is not the same for me as like the team I'm most confident in going to the Super Bowl and winning, right? Like I think those are two separate dynamics here that I'd like to make clear because we've seen over the course of this NFL season who we feel like the top team is at any given moment has fluctuated drastically. I think from week 1 until now, there have been times when the Miami Dolphins are the best team in the league, when the Chiefs are the best team in the league, the Ravens are the best team, the Eagles, the Lions, the 49ers, and even the Dallas Cowboys for a stretch there. Like I was counting on my fingers, but not actually counting. That's like 6 or 7 different teams that we could think of have been the best team in the league for some portion. And it feels like it's just going to be a matter of like who gets hot at the right time and who ends up being kind of the last team standing when you get into the playoffs.
Listen, the playoffs, a lot of people talk about playoff success in the NFL. Oftentimes, the winner in the playoffs is the one that's won the war of attrition. They have their top players available at the time. And you're right. Sometimes it's also about just getting hot. Like, there could be a team right now that's not being talked about a whole lot that could get, the Jaguars. They're sitting there at 7-3. Trevor Lawrence just looked really good against the Titans. Let's say if the Jaguars get hot, they have a really good defensive front. They could be a team. They have good receivers, a talented backfield with Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence as a tandem out of Clemson. They could be a team that all of a sudden we're talking about down the stretch here. The Lions are in that conversation, as well. I think that there's quite a few teams there. But I agree with you. If there's a team right now, the Philadelphia Eagles are it. Jalen Hurts is your quarterback. You got a great 1-2 punch at wide receiver, talented running back, DeAndre Swift. You win the trenches more often than not. Heck, Jalen Carter almost intercepted a spike. That would have been crazy. I did that once in Madden many moons ago. That was one of my favorite plays of all time. I cheated the system and I was like, got it. But in real life, doing that is even getting close to that is insane. But this Eagles team, they have developed both fronts, the offensive line and the defensive line, to dominate. They've added playmakers. They got Kevin Byard on a steal from the Titans. He made a big red zone interception in that game. I think that I'm with you. Right now, they're the best team, but all that can change with a couple injuries. As we can see, the Ravens, they're the number 1 seed, but they just lost Mark Andrews. They could be headed for some tough times soon, and I think they're going to be seeing a lot of things develop over the next few weeks.
Like the problem is we're just over a month removed from this Eagles team. Their only loss was to Zach Wilson and the New York Jets, right? This was not a powerhouse clash of the Titans. Like if they had lost to the Chiefs, no one would think less of the Eagles. It's like, all right, well, that was a really good game. And we don't think very much less of the Chiefs for having lost that game. I mean, we think less of them for the drop passes and other issues, but like, that's not like a bad loss for the Chiefs, but like the Eagles have not just any old loss, but a bad loss on the schedule. And, we're not that far removed from the Ravens, the number one seed in the AFC. They lost 2 weeks ago to the Cleveland Browns. And like the Browns are pretty good, but they don't have anything to write home about at quarterback right now. Like we could have a separate argument about how good the Browns are, but like every single team has shown some level of vulnerability up to this point. And like you mentioned it earlier, like I kind of feel like the 49ers are the team that I'm maybe the most long-term confident in moving forward. Well, the Eagles are still up in that conversation, but the 49ers to me are the team that by the end of the season, I think I will come around on them being like, yeah, once they can prove it a couple more weeks of like getting back to what we saw them do earlier this season, now that they're healthier again, to me, they're still the biggest threat to me overall. But if the Eagles keep winning these close, tough games against teams like the Kansas City Chiefs and don't lose again to Zach Wilson and the Jets or that type of opponent, then it's their crown to lose. I'm just not confident they'll keep it.
Not saying this team is a top dog right now, but 1-7-3 team I have not mentioned that deserves to be in this conversation is the Miami Dolphins. The offense is potent, defense is playmakers. Do you see them as a legitimate threat to be in this conversation in the coming weeks?
Listen, since Jalen Ramsey has been, I would say come back, but he hadn't played in the defense before, since he was sort of re-added to this defense healthy again. It's amazing when you add like a future Hall of Fame cornerback to a defense, how much of a boost that can provide, especially with a defensive coordinator like Vic Fangio, that we've seen him have success on multiple teams when he has talent to work with there. And yet you look at like the Dolphins, they haven't really beaten anybody great, but all of their losses have been to pretty good teams. At the time, the Bills were playing well. They lost to the Eagles and the Chiefs. So they both haven't had a super impressive win, but haven't had a bad loss either. So to me, they're definitely right in this conversation. And I think as the season goes on, we'll start to answer a few of these kind of questions as like the Eagles, the next 3 weeks, they play the Bills, the 49ers, and the Cowboys. We'll get to see like who is who in that kind of stretch. And as the Dolphins go on, they've got the Cowboys and the Ravens and the Bills in their last 3 games of the season. Like we're going to get some more clear answers on, okay, good teams are going to start playing each other a little bit more, and we'll see who the real contenders are and maybe who the pretenders might still be.
Well, there's a lot of pretenders if you ask Tom Brady, who, of course, in Tom Brady and all his golden boyness and all the winning that he did, he kind of he's called the NFL has a lot of mediocrity. I want to talk to you, Lorin, about that, about the state of the NFL, what that means for the future, and what that also means for what the rest of the NFL could look like as we talk forward. We'll get to that in the second segment here of the Locked On NFL podcast. Is your team mediocre? Stick with us. We'll be talking about that in just a minute. But first, we'll remind you, this show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the app you can download right to your phone right now, and it helps you buy tickets for your favorite events and makes that not a stressful act. Because sometimes when you're buying tickets, you're scrambling. You're looking at the last minute. You're trying to find the best deal. Game Time promises you that they're going to give you the best deals and the killer deals, even on last-minute tickets on your phone, to give you the best price, and they have a best price guarantee that can't be beat. So stop stressing over the tickets. Start getting hyped for the fun that you're about to have with Game Time. You can download the app or go to their website, gametime.co. But when you go to the app or the website, you can not just see the tickets and the prices that you're going to be saving money on, but you're also going to see what is the view from those seats and what does that even look like. Making sure that I'm getting the right value for what I'm paying for to see those seats. And you get exclusive flash deals on anything: tickets for football games, basketball games, baseball, hockey, concerts, comedy, soccer, theater events, anything near you. Game Time most likely is going to help you find the best deal for. And they have a Game Time guarantee that can't be beat. It means that you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to the website gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're back here on the Locked On NFL podcast. Chris Carter, Lorin Cox, breaking things down. Lorin, I want to talk to you about Tom Brady and what he brought up recently. He had been talking on the Stephen A. Smith show. And he said, quote, "I think there's a lot of mediocrity in today's NFL. I don't see the excellence that I saw in the past. I think the coaching isn't as good as it was. I don't think the development of young players is as good as it was. I don't think the schemes are as good as they were." And he went on to say that the rules have allowed a lot of bad habits to get into the actual performance of the game. So I just think the product, in my opinion, is less than what it's been. He also brought up how defensive rules have made it tougher on defenses to play actual defense, and that, it doesn't force offensive players to just protect themselves. And I'm like, that's kind of rich coming from Tom Brady, who literally had rules, created to protect him specifically in the NFL. But I do think he has a point. There are talented quarterbacks in today's NFL, but they are not held to the golden standard that was Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, and them whenever they do it out, the world stopped to see those two guys play. And that kind of dictated how the NFL went. But I will push back on this. I think that there's a lot of things that are looked at as mediocre. I think that what's happened is, over time, a lot of practices became more common offensively in the NFL, and it got ahead of things. But I think defensive coordinators across the league are starting to catch up to it, and it's making for a lot of these close contests. Look at the Eagles and the Chiefs games. Those offenses aren't bad, but those defenses are playing well and matching up with each other. So you get a 21-17 game from two of the better quarterbacks in the NFL with some really talented playmakers on both sides. Is the NFL really that mediocre, or do you think part of this is just the parity balancing itself out over time?
Yeah, I think that's a really important part of this conversation. It's like the NFL builds itself to build toward parity, right? The worse you are, the better draft picks you're going to get, the better you are in the waiver wire position. They want to help better teams play better and make it harder for the best teams to play well, to make it more competitive. And I kind of question this on its premise on the very beginning. It's like, yes, perhaps there's more mediocrity in the sense that we just talked about. Like, there's a bunch of different teams that we're not sure who the best team in the NFL is. But isn't that more fun to watch? Like, yeah, we love the Tom Brady, Peyton Manning duels.
Sure.
Those happen in the AFC Championship game once a year and maybe once in the regular season every once in a while. But like this NFL season, it seems like we've had a lot of these weeks where a team that you thought wouldn't have a chance ends up either winning or making it a really close game. Like there's a couple weeks ago where almost all underdogs won across the board. Like you can have the 3-7 Chicago Bears get a huge lead on the 7-2 Detroit Lions and look like they could win that game. And then, like, it feels like this season, every team in almost every game feels like they at least have a chance. Like they have a chance to come in and surprise somebody and play well and potentially win a football game. And I feel like that's more fun for more people. Like we might not have the big peaks of like, wow, what an offensive battle between Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. But like, you don't really see too many fan bases totally left out this season. Like Josh Dobbs can show up in Minnesota and start playing well all of a sudden. Like, sure, the Panthers have been really bad. You're always going to have some teams that are just terrible and don't really stand a chance. But it feels like even the teams a little bit lower on the spectrum can come into a game and maybe still be able to surprise you because they got something up their sleeve, because there is more of that, I guess, mediocrity. But the mediocrity gives more fan bases a chance to be more engaged in the games and have a chance to win on Sundays.
I'm kind of with you on how this develops, because yes, there's mediocrity in some places, but it's that balance that you're talking about. It makes for fun. More teams can have a chance at it. I mean, you look at the way that the NFL is balanced right now. You look at the NFC. Jared Goff isn't a supreme quarterback, but you know what? He's got a decent roster around him, so they're going to compete. And like I look back to those times, and if you remember, like, the Steelers and it was for many years in the AFC, it was either the Patriots, the team that Manning quarterbacked, the Steelers, or the Ravens. Those are the four teams that made the Super Bowl for like 15 years. I think it was, you go back like what, 2001, 2003 and 4. I think after the Raiders Buccaneers Super Bowl, the Patriots went back to back. Then the Steelers went to one. Then Peyton Manning went to one. The Patriots went back again. The Steelers went back again. And then it was Peyton Manning again, lost to the Saints, and then Steelers, Ravens, and then the Patriots again. Like, it was literally just a succession of those teams. And there was Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, a Hall of Fame quarterback, but not on their level. And that's where I think that, like, that's where the NFL is now. Like, Jalen Hurts to me, he is a very good quarterback and he does a lot of things well, but he doesn't do it in the way that people think of the traditional classic, superstar quarterback. And, Patrick Mahomes, I think he fits that billing of being that top guy. But I think that's part of the thing here is that it looks different now. It's not the same way that it was 20 years ago or 10 years ago. Teams are finding different ways to win. And that's part of the NFL. You go through these cycles where defenses key in on, let's stop the pass. And this is something that I think more and more people have started to realize. As defenses got lighter, they got quicker guys, quicker linebackers. They focused more on quicker, faster guys in spots to defend against the pass. Now some of these teams, like the Lions, it's what the Steelers are trying to do. They're trying to run the ball on you now because you got lighter. Okay, let's get stronger. If you don't have, Patrick Mahomes or, Josh Allen or, if the Texans get CJ Stroud, if you don't have one of those guys, let's run the ball. And that might be your ticket there. I think that's what we're seeing here. It's just not as clear yet because it's still in the middle part of the season.
What about the other side of his premise that the coaching is worse? The coaching is not as good. And as a result, then the player development is not as good. I've been kind of going back and forth on that in my head, and I'm not sure that I buy it. I feel like maybe the coaching's not as good in the sense that the rules have changed. And so it's harder to develop players and coach, but I don't know, like if the coaches themselves are lower quality. I feel like there's always been good and bad coaches. And I don't know that we have a higher proportion of bad coaches now than we did back then.
I'm with you on that. I think that there's, I think one, coaching with every generation comes with more innovation, different things that you look at there. There's bad coaches in every era, but there's also great coaches in every era. Bill Belichick is still a coach right now. Did he become bad overnight, or did he just not have Tom Brady anymore? Like there's some of that you could look at there. But I'm with you. I push back on the notion that coaching has fallen off at this point. I think it's more so there's adjustments that are being made, and there is development. Like if CJ Stroud develops into a super quarterback, if Brock Purdy develops into this veteran quarterback that becomes a star, Trevor Lawrence is doing that, Tua with the Dolphins, then what are we talking about here in a few years?
Do you think any part of Brady's there's bad coaching now was a shot at Belichick because they're not doing well since he's been gone?
Absolutely. Like you can't sell me otherwise. I don't care how many times that if they're shown shaking hands, doing all this stuff, that was a shot at that situation there because listen, Bill Belichick ain't changed. He's still the same guy. He just doesn't have a superstar quarterback to lead the way right now. I mean, Bill Belichick without Tom Brady before even we've seen these few years did not have a winning record. So like it's not like there's something like a magic pill there that Bill Belichick just forces his players to eat. He had the best quarterback of his time. So I think that's absolutely a factor there. I guess I look at it again and I see just what teams are asking quarterbacks to do now is taking what's there, making smart reads. Like Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is not, he makes an occasional great throw, but what Brock Purdy does great is that he does the basic things consistently. And when he keeps doing them consistently, it allows for the timing of the offense to stay on point. And I think that's where you have teams like the Niners who've invested in their offensive line, who went and got Christian McCaffrey, and they have talent around Brock Purdy. It allows them to be that balanced group and build things moving forward. I think that's what more and more teams want to be because unless you get that guy out of the draft, like the way the Texans look with CJ Stroud, you're going to need to design your offense that way.
And some of it too is just the dynamics of how the salary cap and the rookie contract structures have changed now with money, where there's less time to develop players. There's more of a hurry. There's more of a hurry of like, all right, if we're 3 years into your rookie contract and you're not great, like we got to move on. Heck, we're seeing that with Justin Fields in Chicago right now. Like because the next contract is going to have to be big for these young players. We don't have time to be patient with you and settle down and develop.
Yeah.
You can't really do the Aaron Rodgers thing very well anymore. I mean, Jordan Love is kind of doing it now, and the Packers are still feeling out whether that's the right choice or not, but you can't just commit a few years purely to player development. It's like, we need you to go out there and be value to us now while you're cheap and kind of learn on the fly and maybe not get as good of a development, but that doesn't necessarily mean the coaches are worse. It's just the circumstances have changed, and old man Tom Brady is yelling to get off his lawn.
Get off his lawn. I like the way that you put that there, but Talking about mediocrity, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers for a second here, because they're 6-4 and they just fired Matt Canada. We'll address that situation. That has been a meme across the country. I'll talk about that. I covered it. I was talking to Mike Tomlin today about that very situation in Pittsburgh. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break here on the Locked On NFL podcast. Chris Carter and Lorin Cox, stick with us. We still have a lot to discuss. But first, I want to remind you that we're brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, just you against the numbers. Instead of battling against thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more or less on 2 to 6 players and their stat projections, and you can watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is the fun new daily fantasy game that everyone needs to start playing right now. With basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, and that's a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, if you like LeBron James and Travis Kelce to hit a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus receptions, you can say, hey, they're going to combine for more or less than that combination, and then you can, again, watch the winnings roll in. With the Prize Picks reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured for NFL games and college football top 25 matchups. You can have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't return in the second half. That player then gets rebooted. That makes Prize Picks the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. Right now, go to Prize Picks, and you can get NFL, MLB, NHL, NBA, MLB's done, college sports, and so much more. Download the Prize Picks app today or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play fantasy sports. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, at prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. We're back here on the Locked On NFL podcast. I'm Chris Carter. He's Lorin Cox. We're both covering Locked On Steelers and Locked On Bears. Lorin, things got pretty crazy in Pittsburgh today. I woke up 8 o'clock in the morning. I had a late night of recording and trying to fix my Twitter account being locked out for no reason because that website is crazy. And then I wake up and I see the Steelers announce we have fired Matt Canada. And I'm like, oh my goodness, because I don't know if it's as loud for you in Chicago, Lorin, but when Pat McAfee goes on the air in Utah and there are fire Matt Canada chants in Utah, I was just like, all right, y'all ain't about this. Like at the Steelers game, it's been happened multiple home games. It had happened at Penguins games, the local hockey team here in Pittsburgh. I can see Steelers fans and Pittsburgh fans in general doing that. But random people across the country, y'all just trying to be part of the joke. But it's no longer a joke because he is fired here. Lorin, you cover the Bears. They have a lot of turnover and upheaval over the past few years there. This is, whereas that happens somewhere else, this is the first time since 1941 the Steelers have fired a coach mid-season as big as Matt Canada. They've had like a couple like light ones. That's a different story. But like a coordinator, that's a huge deal. And it makes you wonder how much of that will actually change anything this season for Kenny Pickett in an offense that's still struggling.
Yeah, that was going to be my question for you. And first of all, I'm super proud of Eddie Faulkner. I got taken over as the interim offensive coordinator. Soft spot in my heart, follow University of Wisconsin alumni. He was a running back there a long time ago. But because I think when you fire an offensive coordinator or any coach, right, there's sort of 2 sides of the coin. It's on one hand, are you firing the guy because you think giving someone else that role already on your staff or whatever will improve that? Or are you firing a guy because this needs to be an accountability thing? And we don't necessarily think it's necessarily going to be better without him, but we just have to sort of show the players and the fans and the organization that what we've had on the field is not acceptable and needs to be different. Even if different isn't going to be hugely better, it just has to be different because we can't keep doing it the exact same way. Which one of those do you think, or I guess it can be both at the same time, but how do you sort of think, like, why now for firing Matt Canada when it's been people chanting for it for months and months and months, and this isn't the first game they've had poor offensive performance in?
I think part of it is it's less about the fans. They don't care about the people outside the locker room. But after that Steelers loss to the Browns, you can see the face of Najee Harris in the locker room. Someone asked him, are things too predictable? And whenever Najee Harris was asked about the play calls for months, going back to his first games with the Steelers, he would say, hey, it's up to us to execute. We have to get it done. I don't care about what the play call. We got to get the play calls are fine. Everyone calls the same plays. He had been riding that line. And something about that game, he was just like, someone asked him, like, did it feel like the Browns were predicting where you guys would go? And he was just like, I'm not going to hold you, but yeah. And he said it like that. Now, here's the crazy part. And as a person who studies all 22, if you go to my Twitter account, on Monday, I'm breaking down the all 22 and everything. I'm looking up things, and I'm showing like, Deontay Johnson was wide open here. George Pickens was wide open here. And not in like late breaking last situations where, oh man, if Kenny Pickett just magically would have seen it, but like literally in the red zone at the 5-yard line, left uncovered in the middle of the field with a slant, and Kenny Pickett's not looking at him. It's those type of things that I think are what's wrong with the offense right now. And again, that does come back down to execution. I've said all along, Matt Canada's biggest problem was never play calling. Everyone said, oh, he has a Saturday offense. First of all, if you say that, you messing up, because most offenses in the NFL are being derived by things played in college football right now. There's a lot of concepts that are being developed in college football that are being brought to the NFL. Heck, there were 2 plays. I think it was the Lions and the Niners in the same week ran a reverse pass to the tight end on a wheel route down the sideline, and people were and it was the same week, the same looking design, and everyone was just like, wow, that was an amazing play call. And here in Pittsburgh, people were like, man, Matt Canada would never call a play like that. And someone said, actually, he did it before them last year with Mitch Trubisky, and it worked for a big play to Pat Freiermuth in the game that they beat the Bengals. And that's the thing. Matt Canada's designs are very similar to a lot of the designs that everyone else had. But I think what the biggest problem that he always had, he does not know how to talk to players. He does not know how to get in their faces and get them to execute the basics to keep them organized and say, hey, let's get everyone on the same page. And that's where the key word of his position was coordinator. It's not just about calling plays to get guys open. It's coordinating people to understand, when I call this play and we get this look or this look, these are the things that you need to stay focused on to take advantage of that opportunity. That's where I think Matt Canada's biggest weakness was, and that's why they called for a switch, because as Mike Tomlin said, Eddie Faulkner, who I'm really fond of as a guy covering here. He's a great interview. He's been very nice to me over the years. I like talking to him. He teaches a lot. But Eddie Faulkner, one thing Mike Tomlin said is he's a great organizer of his room. Everything's tidy. Everything's in order with the running backs that he's run over the years for the Steelers. And I think that's what they need the most. They need someone who's going to just be like, hey, everyone, this week, this is what we're doing. This is be focused, be ready for this. And if he can simply get that and just get average quarterback play from Kenny Pickett, the Steelers not only beat the Browns, I think they beat the Jaguars a few weeks before that. And everyone's looking at them. How is this team 8-2? That is where the Steelers have to make the most improvement. I'm not saying that they will, but I think that's what they're trying to go for with just the switching out of Matt Canada and just getting someone else to just set up the week of practice to head into the game.
Something you said about Kenny Pickett there stood out to me, though, right? It's like, and this idea of how much do you blame the offensive coordinator versus how much do you blame the quarterback they switch? Like you said, like there are receivers that are running open routes, and it's not like it opens up late, but it's like it's within Kenny Pickett's vision, and the play is open. The offensive coordinator can't throw it for him. What the offensive coordinator can do is run a play with an open receiver in the quarterback's progression, and the quarterback's got to get it there. And certainly, I'm not here to defend Matt Canada as a great play caller, but it does seem to me like some portion of this, and maybe that's the question for you, is like, what portion of the blame do you think belongs to Kenny Pickett? Because it's not zero, but is it 25%? Is it 40%? What part of the blame do you put on Pickett versus Canada?
I say it's more like 70%. And this is a person, and like, it's so funny. It's funny that you asked this of me, Lauren, because I cover the Steelers. I also cover the University of Pittsburgh. So like and the thing is, I covered Kenny Pickett in college, and he's been with the Steelers. When he makes mistakes, like everybody else, when Ben Roethlisberger made mistakes, when Najee Harris makes mistakes, when I'm looking at all 22 and I'm like, dang, this is on this guy. This is on this guy. This guy has to do this better. And so many times I pointed to Kenny Pickett, and there are Steelers fans who want Kenny Pickett to do so well, and there are Pitt fans who want Kenny Pickett to do so well, that I've been called a Kenny Pickett hater. And I'm like, you must not know me. I literally, one, I have a Pitt degree. Two, I cover Pitt. I covered Kenny Pickett at Pitt for 2 years. I have his phone. We've texted before. He's been a source for mine on Pitt stories that I've written even since he's left the program. So like, You think I don't want that guy to be a prominent player at the other organization that I cover for the next 10 to 15 years? No, but I have to do my job and call a spade when a spade is a spade. And a spade right now is Kenny Pickett ain't looking good. And that's where I'm at, is that you have to be realistic here. And listen, this is where I've been at for months, maybe even a year now. Matt Canada wasn't a good offensive coordinator, but not because of the play calls and the things that I think that's what people like to say, because that's where they feel like they have control. Like it's Madden, like we can call, if he calls this, we can, if I could have called a better play there. That wasn't the issue because there were open guys, but organizing your week of preparation to make sure that I'm training my quarterback's eyes to be in the right spots at the right time to get offensive linemen to know how to block screen passes the right way. Those are the things I don't think Matt Canada did well enough for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and why that change happens. And if those things are changed, maybe Kenny Pickett's a better quarterback in games. Maybe he has some better performances because he's more focused and locked in. But to your point, you can lead a horse to water. If they don't drink, that can't be on you. And that's where the Steelers, I think this is where the Steelers are going to look at tail end of this year. How does Kenny Pickett look if they give him more organized looks, and how they play there? If he doesn't look any better, I would not be shocked if the Steelers revisit the quarterback market in the offseason.
That was going to be my next question for you, so I'm glad you got to it. Like, this is an audition for Kenny Pickett to some extent, and he's playing for his Pittsburgh future.
I'd say that he's in the discussion. I'd say that he's on those lines, Lauren, because oh boy, if he continues to, if he's just decent the rest of the year, he's fine. But if he's terrible, I would not be shocked if this quarterback class that's really deep right now in college football gets a call from the Steelers. And even if he is decent, I still think they at least take a look at it, because quarterback is too important a position to pass up on. But before we run over time and Ross Jackson gets mad at me, we have to close this out. Lauren, thanks so much for hopping in on the Wednesday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Chris Carter, Lorin Cox, tune into this show every week. Tomorrow, we're getting you ready for Thanksgiving, because it's Thanksgiving. Thanks again for tuning in, everyone, to the Locked On NFL podcast. We'll see you next week right here on the Wednesday edition, when we'll be right back talking about another crazy week of action.